That's cool. Yeah, it was cool. He teaches at UW, so yeah, go like take his course. Why don't you stay on this side first? Look at all this stuff. If you want to move that way so the light's not on your face, a little bit more. Just a hair more. I'm so sorry. Okay, perfect. That's perfect. Oh, that's cute.
Because you're just like my student. You're just growing up.
Oh, look how cute that is.
It is really cute.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm like not from a different. No, my daughter from a different.
Yes, that one. Got there eventually.
I hope that the video caught that.
I really
on
do.
the mic. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you make it to a session? Like 7:30, so. No, you're just saying.
Lauren, you got to your mic. Okay. Hi. Oh, look at this crowd of people. Okay. All right. So, welcome to our adorable little presentation. Lauren and I, are going to be presenting on discriminatory laws against the LGBTQIA+ community and how it affects mental health. I am Dr. Sara Pickett. I am a fourth-year professor at WKU. I also run my private practice online right now. I have a small caseload of, not small at all, of about 20, 25. And I also supervise some students at Spalding in Louisville, where I used to work. So I wrote my dissertation, and a lot of my research previously was on incarceration and mental health in couples. And recently I have switched to looking at women, intersectionality, and mental health, doing a research project right now that's really exciting about internalized sexism and women identified counselors, and also hopefully editing a book on women, mental health, and intersectionality. So I've worked very extensively with LGBTQIA population. I also identify as that. And I've also worked with clients with acute anxiety, complex PTSD, suicidality, depression, you know, the fun list. So anyway, that's me.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm currently in the clinical mental health counseling program at WKU. I'm currently in my second year out of the 3-year program, and I went to WKU to get my Bachelor of Arts in Psychology with a minor in ASL. And my interest in this presentation was really just being interested in helping LGBT clients and LGBT youth especially, and with their current political climate and a lot of discriminatory laws. I think it's important to really be knowledgeable about how these are affecting the mental health of our future clients.
I also am very concerned about this table. I don't know why, but I think I'm just going to keep moving it for the rest of the section, just as far away as I can. So that'll be a fun game. So there are only actually a few of you. I think, you know, this is the end of the conference. We are getting pretty close to the end. So I'm curious, what brought you all here? Why did you choose this session as your last session for this conference? Yeah.
My LGBTQ plus population, they're concerned about what is going on.
Yeah.
You know, and their mental health symptoms have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
You know, and just trying to keep up with all the changes that are going on because just afraid of losing rights.
Mm.
You know, and I remember when LGBTQ was still in DSM-3 as a mental health, you know, diagnosis, and the fear that that is going to return into the DSM again.
Homosexuality as a pathological
Yes.
illness. Yeah.
I work in the school setting, so just being able to understand more about the laws and how they help my students.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause it's a population that is small per school and they feel safe with myself, so I just want to be mindful of that.
I know you just walked in, so I won't put you on the spot, but would you mind sharing why you chose the session? Okay.
And just, being able to know more about the laws. We also, Senate Bill 150 passed a little while back. That's presented a lot of challenges for me in my position. So I always like to connect with other people in the state and kind of see how they're navigating that. We've certainly worked through it, but being a therapist in the schools, that has really changed, slightly changed my approach. One thing we have done though is we have over time been able to get a consent so that says that we can violate that consent. So it gives the parents permission.
Yeah.
So I have that signed on just about every single I work with.
Okay.
So that really helps.
Yeah, okay.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can answer.
Okay.
So I work in Jefferson County in the social emotional learning department, and we have a team of consultants that go on trainings and teachers on trauma-informed care. And we created a session for SEL and the LGBTQ plus community. And so when we go into schools and talk with staff members, that can be very divisive and political real fast. So we're always looking for ways to try and help navigate, like, look, it doesn't matter what your belief is on this, but like at school, everyone deserves to be welcomed.
Right.
And to feel safe. So no matter what you believe, like, here's what you need to kind of take into consideration when you're dealing with the population. So anything else I can add to that?
Sure. Okay, cool. Anyone, you all over here? Would you?
I was supposed to be your facilitator.
Oh.
So that's why I'm here.
It's fine. You should just hang out. Grab some water. Yeah. No, you're fine.
I work in the schools, and I work with Brittany. And so I was very intrigued though,
Yeah.
looking through our book and at the sessions that was our last sessions today, and my brother is part of the LGBTQ community, and so I was drawn to that community and kind of learn more. I want to be able to be involved and know more about the community that I can kind of help my brother. He's in California right now. So be able to kind of help him and be able to help my students as well.
I like that you use the word evolved. Yeah. Alex or Bethany, do you want to share?
I am curious to, somebody who doesn't really have a whole lot of knowledge on the situation as an LGBTQ member. I just would love to hear more about the laws and the information that you have to share.
Here, obviously, to support you all. But also because like 90% of my clients are queer, I also identify as queer, so I think that it's helpful to hear.
Okay. Great. I love a smaller group because then it can feel more intimate and we can do more of this sort of sharing and getting a sense of where you all are coming from and why you're here. So I love this style. All right, so very quickly, we want you all to understand what it means to be a discriminatory group, to be a marginalized group, especially when we're talking about LGBTQIA+, and the direct mental health impacts of these laws. We often think of laws as very macro, and what we're trying to do is to explain that these macro laws are directly daily affecting this population in a very real way. We want to explore minority stress, discrimination, every moment of this community's breaking down of rights or not allowing rights, given the counter response of advocacy and protest. And then some solutions and things that you can do. And I did this presentation in August in Colorado, and it ended very like, ugh, what do we have? What can we do? And I feel like since Tuesday, we're Friday and, the election day was Tuesday, that there's just like a little bit more hope. So I feel excited that there's just a little bit more like, we're gonna make it. Okay.
All right. So LGBTQIA, there's a lot of meanings here and different ways that people identify. So lesbian is women who are attracted to women, gay men who are attracted to men, and it's also used as an umbrella term for same gender attraction, which most of us know. Bisexual is being attracted to more than one gender. Transgender is when someone's gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth. Questioning, so queer is an inclusive to gender diversity. And then questioning is exploring one's sexual orientation or gender identity. Intersex is when someone is born with physical sex characteristics that don't fit typical definitions of male or female. Asexual, aromantic, and agender.
Yeah.
And then asexual is little or no sexual attraction to others. Aromantic is little or no romantic attraction to others. Agender is without a gender identity or feeling neutral about gender. And then, of course, there's many
Plus.
other identities, plus it's pansexual, non-binary, and two-spirit.
Look, it's an alphabet. It's an alphabet soup, and it's beautiful, right? We love it, even though it's a mouthful.
So there's different spectrums here. So there's a difference between sexual orientation and confused for each other, and there's all three differences here. So, for example, someone can be asexual, genderqueer, and male, or a lesbian, non-binary female. So these kind of all are different. So with sex, it's just pretty much female, male, or intersex, and then it's different, say, from gender as well. So, yeah, there's many different ways that people can identify.
Yeah, and what people don't tend to realize is that it's a spectrum when we talk about sexuality, when we talk about gender, and even sex in a lot of ways. And so this is really important to remember, and then the conflation of sex and gender is something that really irritates me. If you go to the DMV, this is an example I've used a lot in classes. If you go to the DMV, they say, what's your sex? And then they say, woman, man. It's not right. That's your gender, right? They would have to say female and male for your sex. And so I often want to like raise my hand at the DMV, which of course, no, can you change your forms? But anyway, there is a difference, and it's important to remember that.
So this is exploring basically how common being LGBT is across the world. So the Philippines and the United States have most people who identify as LGBT. And I think this is important to know if you have clients from other countries, just seeing how common it is in other places and their attitudes about it will affect it. So for example, if you have a Korean client who is from South Korea, their perspective on LGBT will likely be different from someone who is Filipino or American. But 9.3% of US adults identify as LGBT+, and then 5.5% of US adults identify as LGBT, and then there are 1.3 million same-sex couple households. So it's pretty common, but also maybe isn't talked about a lot, but it's still seeing these numbers, knowing that it does exist in the country.
When I saw this, I was surprised. You're nodding. Can I call you out why you're nodding? You're nodding. Can I call you out why you're nodding?
Yeah, I was surprised too, just to see, you know, sometimes we in America we just get horse blinders and
Yeah.
the rodeo, but then seeing it across the globe is it's something I don't really talk about.
Do you think this is probably underreported?
Yes.
Too? Yeah.
Yes.
It's got to be probably significantly higher.
Absolutely, yes. And I was really interested in this. The Philippines, I don't think I think about the Philippines very often. And I definitely don't think about the LGBTQIA plus population of the Philippines. And I was like, oh. And I was curious what you all might think as to why that's at the same percentage as the
I
US.
think it's more accepted.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing. We might have more people reporting.
Right.
Truthfully.
Because it is accepted and there are laws that allow them to freely move about their country, right, without being discriminated against or being in actual physical danger. So
Because I have a friend who's Filipino, and being LGBT is very much accepted over there, and to the point where he didn't really think of himself as gay because he was just used to seeing men in drag and doing things without that label. So it was very much accepted and really common over there. And so looking at how people identify. So 54.6% identifies bisexual, 11.7% is lesbian, 24.5% is gay, 11.3% is transgender, and then 3.3% is other. I guess we can also assume that could be queer or other sexualities as well that aren't as common or are talked about as much.
And this is people who are under the umbrella, right? So those who are under the umbrella of LGBTQIA, this is how they would say they identify, right? And this is within the United States specifically. So, all right, so tiny text that you can't see, and it's white. So let me just do a little reading for you. So around 61% of US adults say there is a great deal or a fair amount of acceptance of this population. And about 52% say that that's the same for bisexual people. Why do you think the percentage of acceptance of people who identify as bisexual is lower than the overall? So I'll say that again. There's a lower level of acceptance for people who identify as bisexual than people who identify as gay or queer or lesbian.
Because with bisexual, and certainly with my experience, there is discrimination within the LGBTQ plus population.
Absolutely.
And bisexual people are often frowned upon and looked at as they sold out and they can't make up their mind.
Right. Yes.
And that's a phase.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Any other thoughts?
And I hear that so much from parents.
Ah.
They, especially middle school and high school, they just don't know what they want.
Oh.
They're just saying they're bisexual because they haven't a lot of comments like that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the point that you made about the discrimination within the community, that's internalized homophobia right there, which is a whole other issue that we're not going to talk about, but that does exist for sure. Oh boy. Okay. In contrast, I can barely even read it. Only 13 to 14 say that the same level of acceptance applies to the transgender and non-binary community. That shouldn't surprise anyone, and that's very low, right? That's 13% is a very low number. And then support for legal protections is relatively high. So 80% of Americans favor protection for LGBTQ people against discrimination in terms of jobs, housing, and public accommodations, healthcare. However, the support is dropping. So we definitely had a moment of like high support. And now, of course, I mean, we're not surprised again that the support is dropping, and that one poll recently found that support for non-discriminatory protections fell from 80% to 76%. Now, 4% is not that much, but it's noteworthy. You were going to say something?
Yes. Yeah, is there a difference or a notable difference between metro compared to urban areas? I mean, rural areas? You know,
Probably, yeah. I would love to look at that data.
I think definitely there is.
you know, because with the rural areas, you know, I mean, I don't want to go across the rural area and have my rainbow flag out. It's like,
Yeah. I do a lot of traveling. We were actually just talking about this before the session, and I do a lot of driving because I'm not super keen on flying, which now that what happened at the airport, I feel so bad, but also it's very scary. But anyway, so I drive a lot, and I find myself in rural areas, and there's definitely a different way that I behave and present when I'm in those spaces, just purely out of protection, right? And just being smart. And some people would say that I'm being paranoid, but there's enough data to show that it's okay to be a little bit hypervigilant about these things. So knowledge and general gaps. So for example, 55% of non-LGBTQ Americans report that they don't really understand the community, and they don't really understand the dimensions of the community. I had one male student who's cis, white, heterosexual, very, very, very sweet man in my class this semester. We're doing case studies, and he actually got assigned to be a pansexual woman. It was, like, it just happens. And he came up to me later and he said, I was so afraid of being homophobic the whole time. And I was like, oh, sweetheart, but it was like he had a fear, he had a lack of knowledge, he had the best intentions, but that whole time he's like, I'm just going to say something wrong and throw myself and that community under the bus. So I thought that was really interesting. All right, next slide. All right, minority stress. maybe some of you are familiar with this concept. This is the idea that stigmatized groups experience a certain type of stress that is specific to their marginalized discriminatory status. So therefore, it's a type of stress that they only experience. Now, this being of a stigmatized group and having this minority stress, especially with intersectionality, that means having more than one marginalized identity. So if you are a person of color and a woman and LGBTQ, you would say that you have three. That this can cause mental health problems, and that this can come from external actions, right? Threats of violence or laws or whatever, and it can be internalized, right? So you have shame, you have issues with self-esteem, self-worth. So these experiences can, like I said, they cause mental health disparities. They look different for different communities, but definitely when we're looking at the LGBTQIA plus population, this is very present, whether people are aware of it or not. And that this has definitely gone up since 2016, and you can imagine it's gone up since this year, right, with the second presidency. This is mine, right? Oh, you should take it. Yeah, you should take this.
So what is discrimination? So discrimination are behaviors that create, maintain, or reinforce advantage for some groups and their members over other groups and their members. So I think we can also think of lots of examples in American history of discrimination. Going back to intersectionality, basically like me as a Black lesbian, I kind of face, I guess, like two levels of discrimination when it gets together, and so that adds with the minority stress. So meaning with clients who are fit in different marginalized groups, they're experiencing different levels of discrimination on all sides. So this can occur in any setting. So the LGBT population has particularly been discriminated against. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people in the U.S. have experienced a long history of discrimination, including criminalization and classifications as mentally ill, as you mentioned in the DSM. But experiences of discrimination, stigma, and harassment create stress for mental, behavioral, and physical health, leading to negative health outcomes. So it can start with the mental health and then also lead to physical health problems as well. Experiencing persistent discrimination in LGBT populations affects well-being, but it also limits their access and utilization of resources.
So this is, of course, problematic because being of a minority group, having discrimination, experiencing minority stress, you're in a heightened need of mental health services, and yet you're less likely to have that access to those services.
So types of discrimination. So there's microaggressions. These are very small, often minute levels of discrimination that lots of people say they can't notice unless you're in that group. But these have a great effect in all aspects of interpersonal interactions and relationships.
Can I give an example? I'd love to give an example. Okay, so I was at a hotel in Bowling Green, where WKU is, with my partner, and there's a very nice man who works in the cafeteria, and we become friends because I stay over. I live in Louisville, I commute, so sometimes I stay over at this hotel. And he was like, "Well, tell me about you." And I said, "Oh, I have two kids." And he was like, "Oh, have you had them the whole time?" And I was like, "What do you?" And I realized he was assuming that we had adopted, right? That there was no way that either of us could have birthed a child, right? Or that I could have. And I was like, "Yeah, we've had them their whole lives. Yep, the whole time." Anyway, microaggression. There you go. Okay.
And then also from someone else's perspective, they may have seen like, "Oh, I don't see what's so offensive
Of
about
course.
that. What are they talking
Yeah,
about?"
of course. And I didn't hold it against him because he had the best intentions. And when he realized that he had kind of messed up, he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." He didn't get defensive. He just was like, "Oh, this is not something he's exposed to at all."
So law and policies at the local, state, and federal level, threat of physical or sexual violence, employment, housing, and lending, healthcare access and interactions with medical professionals, public accommodations such as bathrooms, other life domains. So lots of discrimination just everywhere, everywhere you go, police, prisons, jails, heterosexism. This is assuming partner is of the opposite sex. Media representation of sex and love are almost exclusively heterosexual. So, representation of LGBT couples on television. and they continue to ask or discuss old, outdated, and homophobic tropes about homosexuality.
Okay.
What
You
was
wanna-
the difference between the maps?
Between the maps. This is sexual orientation and gender identity, and this is no sexual orientation or gender identity protections. So different types of protections. So these are states that have some sort of protections for this population. These are the states that have passed or have proposed discriminatory laws against this community.
Apparently, safe, not really safe.
And 21 versus 29.
Right, so different experiences of discrimination, harassment, and barriers. So there's lots of these. Like I said, they're really everywhere. So being aware of these can increase empathy when you're working with clients and they're talking about different experiences they've had. So employment, among LGBT employees, 47% reported experiencing discrimination. So they're talking about different experiences they've had. So employment, among LGBT employees, 47% reported experiencing discrimination or harassment at their job due to their identity or sexual orientation, 72% in the past year. And then with transgender and non-binary employees, more than twice as likely as cis LGBT to report past year discrimination. Everyday healthcare. So among LGBT adults, younger and female respondents reported higher rates of discrimination in daily life. 80% of LGBT adults aged 18 to 29 said they experienced discrimination at least a few times.
80%. That's really high. Just want to point that out.
Violence and victimization. So a report found that LGBT people experience a lot of violent victimizations per 1,000 persons in 2022 and 2023, and I'm sure that's gone up a lot in the past year as well. Healthcare and avoidance behaviors. So 78% of LGBT respondents, including 90% of transgender and non-binary, which makes sense, reported taking at least one action to avoid discrimination, hiring relationships, avoiding healthcare, changing dress based on their status. Impact on health and well-being. Discrimination had moderate or significant negative effects on mental health for 52% of LGBT adults in a survey. And then with intersectionality, LGBT adults of color, trans and non-binary folks, and those with disabilities face heightened rates of discrimination. So the more intersectionality there is, the more discrimination they typically face on a daily basis.
And I do want to point out this other thing that if you all didn't notice, this is 106.4 violent victimization per 1,000 versus 21.1. That's significant, right? And that's victimization of all kinds. And that's not just threats or fear of, right? That's some type of harm done. And that's significantly higher. I love this graphic, and I found that other people found this to be helpful as well. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I really liked it too.
Yeah.
It shows basically the cycle that goes on with types of discrimination. So there's indirect discrimination, which I think is important to notice things that are just there that people see and that affect them a little bit every day. You go to the bathroom and you're not able to go because of experiences, and that those things add up. Going through that every single day. And then victimization, you have hate crimes, and then harassment, bullying, gossiping, name calling, and then there's direct discrimination. So being refused service at a restaurant, or with healthcare, not being hired at a job. All these different ways that people are just knocked down. And then historical causes, so of course sex conversion therapy, which was something that was really active many years ago.
And so
And sexual orientation seen as a disease in the DSM, as you mentioned. Lack of education and representation. A lot of people don't really understand a lot of what non-binary means, what it means to be trans. Those are topics that are still being discussed and educated about and learned about today. Religion, religious persecution, and being seen as a center for your sexual orientation. Cultural causes, denial of familiar rights and recognition. I think also with culture, that's important to know. Different communities see LGBT differently. So if you're working with someone who's Hispanic or Black, or from another country, that'll be a factor there. Unconscious bias, so that's kind of where microaggressions can fit in as well, stereotyping, the process of coming out, non-inclusive registration forms, and then legal effects, arrest, censorship, same-sex marriage bans, and then the macro effects is, of course, poor mental health, poverty, suicide, homelessness, forced genital inspections. So.
And similar to what I said in the beginning, when we talk about macro effects, again, we often think of macro as untouchable and hard to comprehend, and that doesn't affect me, or that doesn't affect my community, but I know that happens somewhere. These things are very much happening, and we're seeing that with our students. I'm seeing that with clients for sure. Homelessness, absolutely. Much more heightened issues with mental health and mental health symptoms, poverty, suicidality. It's extremely high in this community. And then
unspoiled property, 9.5% of all youth in the U.S. are estimated to be
that were, so keep that in mind that was only 22 years ago that they got rid of the last anti-sodomy law. The Comstock laws, so prohibiting just the distribution of obscene material, obscene meaning anything that involved, anything that resembled queer, gay, LGBTQIA content, right, into the community in a way that I think is delightful. I think subversiveness in its creativity is fantastic. Executive Order 10450. So this was Eisenhower. He banned LGBTQIA plus individuals from serving in the U.S. government because it was called the Lavender Scare. Similar to the Red Scare, he believed that people who were of this community could not be trusted to work in the government because they were weak and they were highly influenced. I mean, that's not exactly, highly influenced and could be easily bribed. And this was all part of the fear that people of different statuses were going to threaten the safety of the country. But, I mean, really, what are we talking about? Just prejudice, right?